The attic, filled with the dust of the past, suddenly felt too small, too heavy with 10 years of unspoken emotion. They descended the narrow stairs, their hands linked now, navigating the quiet confusion of the empty house. The last of the estate sale crowd had gone, leaving behind only the cold, late afternoon silence. Finn led Adrian to the old parlour, the room where they had once spent hours lost in music. The grand piano still stood in the centre, a dark gleaming sentinel. The room was cold, but the light spilling through the tall, mullioned windows was a soft, pale gold, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Adrian let go of Finn's hand and walked toward the piano, his fingers tracing the smooth, cool wood of the fullboard. "This is where we ruined Batch forever," Adrian murmured, a smile touching his lips. "No," Finn corrected, coming up behind him, resting his chin lightly on Adrian's shoulder. "This is where we discovered the sound of ourselves. It's a huge difference." The pressure of Finn's body against his back, the familiar warmth and weight, was a sensory anchor Adrian hadn't realized he'd been missing. He turned in the small space between the piano and the bench, wrapping his arms loosely around Finn's waist. "I haven't felt this present in 10 years, Adrian confessed, his voice low and ragged. "In Chicago, I'm always half a moment ahead, thinking about the next rehearsal, the next flight, the next review." Finn slipped his arms beneath Adrian's, pulling him closer until their chests were flush. "Stay here then, just for this moment. Forget the city, forget the score." He began to kiss Adrian again, but this time the kiss held a new depth, a conversation spanning their entire history. It started slow, reverent, an acknowledgement of the past wounds. Then it grew hungry, urgent, fueled by the decade of separation. It wasn't just physical contact, it was a realignment, like tuning a delicate instrument that had been left in the cold for too long. Finn's hands moved to cup Adrian's face, holding him steady, grounding him in the here and now. Adrian ran his fingers through Finn's long, silky hair, realizing how intimately he remembered the exact feel of it. Finn eventually broke the kiss, resting his forehead against Adrian's. Their eyes closed. He reached back and lifted his hands to the back of Adrian's neck, sinking his fingers into the soft, yielding skin where tension always collected. He began a slow, deliberate massage, working out the knots that Adrian's career had pressed into his shoulders. "You are so tense," Finn whispered, his voice dark with tenderness, always carrying the weight of the entire string section. "It's just my posture," Adrian breathed out, tilting his head back slightly to give Finn better access. "No, it's not," Finn countered, turning Adrian to sit on the piano bench. He knelt on the floor between Adrian's knees, forcing him to look down. Finn took Adrian's hands, spread them open, and examined the fingertips, calloused and grooved by the relentless pressure of the cello strings. He brought them to his mouth and kissed the tips of each finger, a quiet, almost ceremonial gesture. "These hands," Finn said, his voice husky, "they make magic, Adrian, but they're also just your hands. They need to be held sometimes, not just used." He looked up, his slate-colored eyes deep with affection. "I want to give you back the quiet. I want to give you back the time you spent practicing how to look like you weren't hurting." Adrian leaned down, his own fingers trailing the strong line of Finn's jaw. "Don't ever leave me again, Finn," he heard himself say, the plea stripped bare of all pride and professionalism. "I didn't go anywhere," Finn replied, his eyes shining. "I've been right next door, playing Debussy, hoping you'd hear it one day." Finn stood up, taking Adrian's hands and pulling him gently to his feet. He began to lead him out of the cold parlour and across the creaking wood floor, toward the hallway. They didn't speak again until they were in the warm, familiar sanctuary of Finn's bedroom, a room Adrian instantly recognized from a life ago, now updated with stacks of musical scores, a comfortable mess and the faint, enduring scent of sandalwood. Finn turned to Adrian and pressed him gently back onto the bed. He didn't rush but instead sat beside him, his gaze soft, just watching Adrian, letting him feel safe. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from Adrian's forehead. "You look tired but better," Finn noted. "I feel unfurled," Adrian admitted, feeling the heavy exhaustion of the day finally settle into profound relaxation. Finn smiled, that deep, true smile that reached his eyes. He lay down beside Adrian, pulling him into the curve of his body, sheltering him with a strong, solid embrace. There was no need for words or dramatic action. The intimacy was in the stillness, the simple confirmation that they were finally, physically back in the same space. Adrian closed his eyes, listening not to the distant roar of the ocean, but to the strong, steady cadence of Finn's heartbeat beneath his ear. It was the only rhythm he needed. For the first time in 10 years, Adrian the cellist was simply home. Flashback. 10 years ago, August, the Oakhaven bus depot was a dusty, wind-bitten shack overlooking the highway, the last place where grand declarations of love or devastating farewells should take place. But for Adrian, who was 18 and carrying the weight of his entire future in a heavy velvet-lined cello case, it felt like the end of the world. The bus to Boston, the first leg of his journey to the city, was due in 20 minutes. Finn stood beside him, silent, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket, despite the summer heat. Finn hadn't tried to talk Adrian out of it. That had happened weeks ago, in arguments that had scorched the air between them. Now there was only the dull ache of inevitability. "I got the scholarship, Finn," Adrian repeated, needing to justify the enormity of his departure one last time. "The Juilliard acceptance, this is the chance. My entire life depends on me taking this bus." "I know what it is," Finn said. His voice flat, he turned his head, looking not at Adrian, but at the highway stretching endlessly toward the horizon. "It's your path and I respect that. I just don't respect that you're acting like my path doesn't exist." Finn wasn't going to be a performer. He was going to be a composer. His world was rooted in Oakhaven, the coastal silence necessary for him to hear the intricate internal melodies he needed to capture. He had already set up his studio in the old Victorian. He belonged to the deep, resonant rhythm of the ocean. Adrian belonged to the soaring, demanding rhythm of the symphony hall. "You could come with me later," Adrian offered, knowing it was a hollow promise. "Next year, once I'm settled." Finn finally looked at him, and the pain in his slate-coloured eyes was so profound it made Adrian recoil. "And do what, Adrian? Write film scores in a cramped, dark apartment while you practice for 10 hours a day? I need the air here, I need the perspective. You'd hate me for asking you to stay, and I'd suffocate trying to keep up with you in a place where the noise never stops." They were both right, that was the tragedy. Their love was a magnificent duet, but their lives were impossible scores, written in different keys and tempos. Adrian felt a crushing, urgent desperation. He reached out and grabbed Finn's hand, gripping it hard. "Then what do we do? We can't just stop. This isn't how our story ends." Finn's hand, usually so warm and capable, was cold. He squeezed back once, a fierce, final pressure. "We don't end it," Finn said, his gaze unwavering. "We put it on pause, a long, silent rest. You go and become the cellist you need to be, and I'll stay here and become the composer I need to be. If our lives can ever balance, if they can ever run on the same sheet music again, maybe we'll find our way back to the same concert hall." "That's so cinematic, Finn," Adrian choked out, tears finally blurring his vision. "But people don't wait 10 years for a theory to prove itself." "We're not people, Adrian," Finn whispered, and then he pulled Adrian into a hug that was brutal in its finality. It was a goodbye that felt like a severance. Finn breathed in the scent of Adrian's neck one last time, a memory he would hoard like gold. When he pulled back, the bus rumbled into the depot, its brakes hissing. Finn wiped a tear from Adrian's cheek with his thumb, then took a decisive step back. "Go," Finn commanded, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Don't look back, don't call unless it's about a gig. You don't get to be half present in Chicago, you have to be all in." Adrian, unable to speak, picked up the immense weight of his cello case. As he stepped onto the bus, he risked one look back. Finn was already walking away, his back straight, heading toward the coast. He didn't turn around, he followed his own mandate. Adrian found a window seat, settled his instrument, and watched Oakhaven shrink. He played the separation perfectly, shedding no more tears, focusing only on the itinerary ahead. He built his wall right there, on the Boston-bound bus, brick by painful brick. He knew with a terrible certainty that if he had stayed, the sound of Finn's music would have drowned out the sound of his own ambition. He had traded a life of profound, messy love for a career of impeccable, disciplined achievement. The balance was gone, replaced by a devastating binary choice. The night was deep and starless, and the only sound in Finn's room was the rhythmic, distant sigh of the Atlantic pulling back from the shore. Lying next to Finn, Adrian felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. They weren't tangled or urgent. The storm of the past day had exhausted the need for that. Instead, they lay on their sides, Facing each other, the heavy down duvet pulled up to their chins. Finn's arm was curved beneath Adrian's head, his hand resting lightly against Adrian's shoulder, a casual, protective warmth. Adrian slowly traced the line of Finn's collarbone with his fingertip, enjoying the simple reality of the touch. I remember every curve of this room, Adrian whispered, the sound husky in the darkness. The way the window rattles when the wind is coming from the north. The sound of your breathing when you're truly asleep. Finn smiled, his eyes opening slightly, dark and liquid in the dim light. You used to tell me that my breathing was syncopated, like a jazz drummer trying to throw off the rest of the band. It is, Adrian agreed, a soft laugh escaping him. But it's my favorite rhythm. He shifted, leaning in closer, and Finn responded instantly, gathering him tighter, moving his hand from Adrian's shoulder down his spine. A slow, reassuring stroke that melted away the last vestiges of tension. I used to wake up in Chicago, Adrian confessed, the words tasting slightly bitter, and for a few seconds I'd think you were still there. I'd feel the imprint of your heat, and I'd reach out, and the bed would just be cold and vast. Finn tucked Adrian's head right beneath his chin, burying his nose in Adrian's hair. I did the same thing. I kept forgetting that my side of the bed wasn't supposed to have a warm weight on it anymore. For years, I just let the memory be the ghost in the room. I wrote so many pieces that were just silence waiting for your instrument to step in. A silent rest, Adrian remembered, referencing Finn's words from the bus depot 10 years ago. The longest rest note of my life. Finn agreed. He lifted his head to look down at Adrian, his expression serious. I'm not letting you build that silence again. Adrian, if you go back to Chicago, we figure out the score, we write the harmony to include the distance. You always have a metaphor for everything. Adrian smiled, reaching up to gently cup Finn's cheek. His skin was warm and slightly rough. It's how I process, Finn shrugged. And right now, the only thing I'm processing is the geometry of us. We fit. After all that time, after all those separate stages, we still fit. Adrian turned his head and pressed a lingering kiss against the warm, strong curve of Finn's neck. It was a kiss of gratitude, of recognition, and of profound, simple comfort. I missed your intelligence, your focus, your drive, Finn whispered, trailing his fingers softly along Adrian's ribs. But mostly I missed this, the quiet of you, the stillness you only let go of when you're safe. He paused, then pulled back just slightly to meet Adrian's eyes in the dark. And I missed the music you used to play just for me. The untuned, perfectly flawed little pieces you'd improvise late at night. Adrian laughed softly. I can still play those, I just need my audience. They settled back into the embrace, a profound stillness falling over them. Adrian rested his hand on Finn's chest, feeling the slow, sure beat of his heart, the most essential, fundamental rhythm in his life. It wasn't the sound of ambition or the complexity of a symphony. It was the cadence of coming home. In the darkness, wrapped in Finn's arms, Adrian finally found the beautiful, sweet burden of stillness he had chased away a decade ago. It was heavy and it was perfect,